I don't know. I think I was having a bad day, bro. But honestly, like those early wake ups, some of those early wake ups really get to you, bro. You're rocking up at the studio at like 3 a.m., 4 a.m. in the morning, Aussie time. You really don't want to be there. And then I think I took that energy into the broadcast and I was just going in on Gade for no reason. And then so that was one thing. We got pulled aside after the broadcast and got absolutely our asses handed it to us. And it was all my fault. Like I was the one talking shit, but Kev got in trouble just as much as I did, and he didn't do anything wrong at all. It was literally all my fault.
All right, Mitch Pilipowski, aka Pilski, aka Pilsner, aka Pilskapowski, aka whatever you can come up with. Even things like FYD, FID. I don't know where that comes from, but we'll get into that because we've got Pilski today to have a chat about his history and maybe a few other things. Let's talk about it, Pilski. You're an Australian CSGO and Valorant commentator. You do a bit of StarCraft, Magic the Gathering on the side, some other titles here and there, a bit of World of Tanks. So you've been around the block and you've been here for quite a while. So I think there's a lot to get to. Maybe we should start at the beginning, though. I think that's where these normally start. When you first got into esports, Call of Duty, right? So
Yeah.
how does this come about? Obviously, you're one of those little Zoomer kids jumping on Call of Duty, the new cool game.
Yeah. I mean, I would say even before that, just to like sidetrack already and literally the first topic.
Don't
When
worry.
I guess my
Everyone does that.
gaming started. Yeah, my gaming started when I was literally like 4 or 5 years old or something, because I have two older brothers and a dad who all played games. So my gaming started sitting down playing StarCraft Brood War on a PC, and I remember like one of my first like childhood, play dates was like I had like a friend over from like kindergarten or something like that. And I was like, I'm gonna play StarCraft. And then he was playing StarCraft and I was like, build the SCV, build the SCV. And he just didn't get it. He didn't know what the hotkey was, and he was getting himself supply blocked. And I was getting ultra triggered as like a 5 or 6 year old child. So
So,
that's really where it all started.
you know what? I think that actually gives a great insight into your brain, okay, as a 5-year-old, that you're getting triggered at how someone's playing a game, because that's
Yeah, and
probably
he's
something
literally
that'll come
like,
up.
I'm literally a 5 year old child. I don't know what the
Yep,
fuck you want from me.
yep, yep. Uh,
And then after that, it was like a couple of years of World of Warcraft since that released. And then I definitely did get into COD and kind of played various games at the same time for a long time. But yeah, Call of Duty was like, obviously for anyone who's like, we're not talking about console Call of Duty, we're talking about PC Call of Duty, so like pro mod and all that kind of stuff. But for anyone, I mean, I don't know what the scenes were like globally, but at least here in Australia, we kind of had like different segmented scenes. So we had like the new Call of Duty scene, which was like whatever COD was newest and was like viable to be played. Some people would play that. And then you had like the purist scene, which was like Call of Duty 4 Pro Mod, which I think most people agree, between Call of Duty 2 or Call of Duty 4, most people agree that those were the best Call of Duties, and all the purists and the best players would usually play that. So those were the two kind of segmented scenes. And I played mostly the newer Call of Duties because I was just not as good as the best Call of Duty 4 like Pro Mod players. Like some of those guys were like around for a long time. And I think the comparison that I would make for people who are more familiar with something like Counter-Strike is it was a bit like 1.6 in source. Like Call of Duty 4 Pro Mod was a bit more like 1.6. It was an older game, but most people felt like it was the best made and you couldn't really top it. And then there was a newer version of the game that other people played, and it was kind of like two segmented scenes.
so when was this? This would have been like before 2015 sometime. What was
Oh, for
the
sure. This was like maybe okay, so like back in the day on the forums, I think I would probably be considered a new person, which it just goes to tell you a little bit about esports. Like back in the day on like the CG forums and all that kind of stuff, it would be like you would have, and the same thing with like Steam IDs and stuff like that for people who are old school with Counter-Strike. You had an account number attached to like whatever account you had, and however many digits that you had on that account, was how new
it's a
you
flex.
are. So it is a flex. It is 100% a flex. So I think my account might have been created in like 2010 or 2011 or something, which people would consider to be new. Like if you had an account that was like 05, 06 or something like that, or maybe even a little bit before that. Or you had a Steam ID back in the day that was like, you know, 04, 05, 06, you know, you're like 4 or 5 digit Steam ID. Then you were a bit of an OG, but I was, you know, at that point, a young teenager, and I was a little bit newer than some of the OG, you know, Call of Duty, Counter-Strike players and things like that.
What was it like back then, right? Playing esports, or I mean, I guess at the time, again, you know, I've said this in retrospects, but back then it probably wasn't even called esports. It was just like kind of competitive gaming, right? So what was it like? There was no prize pools, I assume, at least not at the level you were competing at, or
I was thinking about this the other day, and the prize pools back then were, people nowadays, if they looked at a prize pool like that, would say something like, that's not even worth playing, you know? Like nowadays you have like a weekend cup or something that's like, I don't know, like someone will put up, you know, between like 1 and 5 grand or something like that, you know, and some people, like the best teams and stuff like that, will look at that and they'll be like, that's a waste of time. Like, what are we going to earn for first place? Like a couple $100 each. But back in the day, I feel like people would play like whole leagues, and there was like prestige around it, and it meant something to be like in the top league. And I feel like that's been lost a little bit. I feel like in our domestic scene a little bit. There's definitely you've definitely lost a little bit of the luster of being in the most prestigious league. And I think people really hyper focus nowadays on like who are the best couple of teams and what have they achieved, as opposed to like it means something to even be like the worst team in the professional league.
I think even to be honest, to make an argument about it, like teams that are now today in the top leagues are far better than teams would have been back then playing in the top leagues, because
I think
the infrastructure is so much better. There's more people competing, right? The barrier to entry is lower, therefore more people come in, therefore there's more opportunity for better people to come in and work their way through. And
I think that's probably true, but I don't know. There's some like small part of like my nostalgia brain that believes like some of those teams were like pretty sick. Maybe the whole overall level of competition might have been lower, but you know, I think about some of the teams that I used to look up to, or some of the teams that I used to play against and stuff, and it felt like, you know, some of those teams were just like fucking unbeatable, you know?
All right, let's talk about your old alias before we go into Hearthstone, because
All right.
What is it, FID or FYD?
FYD.
Okay,
Yeah.
what does that mean?
It's cringe, so I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to talk about it. But let's just say it either means fuck your dad or follow your dreams or something like that.
Something
okay?
like that. All right, so not necessarily what are the origins of it. Like, I mean, whatever. Everyone comes up with a cringe name. I've come up with the Elfish guy. I don't know if I would do that again. You know what I mean?
Before it was FYD, I literally was called Mitch.
Yeah.
Like in Call of Duty and stuff like that. Or I used to be the guy. I used to be the guy that nowadays we have these guys in like CS and Valorant where it's like you start a new season and it's like, oh, this bloke's changed his alias. Like that used to be my fucking thing when I was like a teenager. But yeah, my name was Mitch going into CS, but for anyone who was around in like the source days of CS and early CS:GO, there was already someone called Mitch. And so when I started playing CS, everyone was like, what the fuck? Like you'd literally called Mitch, expelled exactly the same as this other guy. So I kind of had to change my alias.
That is going to be an issue that crops up more and more the deeper we go into, you know, our lifetime, I guess. Like, obviously, all the names you could possibly think of now have kind of been taken. And so anyone new that's like just jumping onto the internet for the first time is pretty much going to be like taking someone else's name in some way, shape, or form. But the reason I brought this up was because obviously people know you now as Pilski or Pilly. I think the transition from Pilly to Pilski was, you know, maybe not as big of a deal. But why change from Mitch to FYD to Pilly? Like, what's going on there? Why did you end up sort of finally settling on this one?
I think before, I mean, okay, I'm not going to go into like what it means or like why it's cringe and all that kind of stuff. But the reason why my alias was FYD was like I was in like a long distance relationship with this girl from America, and I went and like lived with her and all the shit. And I don't know, for some reason I felt like, oh, I changed my alias to be like something meaningful to me, and I will become like an epic pro gamer. And you know, to be honest, Jordan, it actually kind of worked. It actually kind of worked a little bit. I'm not gonna lie.
All right. Well, you know, for anyone out there, budding pros, Choose your
Yeah.
name and make it something cringe, and you will become a
Make
better
it
gamer.
something cringe and meaningful to
Mm,
you, and you know, something about like a lady or something like that, and
awesome.
you'll get mad motivation.
That's great. Great. I love that. All right, let's jump into Hearthstone because this was like, I suppose I don't know if I want to say a big part of your career, but the irony of it is you still play Hearthstone, right? So you were playing,
I don't play the actual
sure, but
the
like
actual game. I play like Battlegrounds a little bit.
I don't know anything about Hearthstone, but the Hearthstone app is open, and that's what matters to me. So you still play Hearthstone, but
Yeah.
you quote unquote professionally played. I mean, you were in an org, right? So
Yeah.
back then, that's about as close to professional playing as you can get. Exile 5, you joined them in February of 2015. Didn't last very long. I saw the exit post in like August of 2015. It was like,
Uh,
thank you so much, Pilski. It's been great to have you as part of the family. And then there's like a statement from Pilly and there's a statement from Dot and stuff. And it's just like, what is this?
yeah.
This is like 2015 esports in a nutshell. But
Yeah.
what sort of stuff were you competing in? What were you actually doing as far as playing Hearthstone was concerned back then?
Yeah, right. So Hearthstone, I mean, at the start of it, so like obviously for anyone who knows the Hearthstone scene, no one's going to know me.
Mm,
Like, yeah, if there was some pro Hearthstone player or there was someone that knew the Hearthstone scene and was like watching like Masters and all these new tournaments and stuff, none of these players would know who I am. I don't think. Because like I said, I played under different aliases and all that kind of stuff. So when I played Hearthstone, I played it when the game came out, the classic version of the game, and like into Nax, which was like one of the first expansions and stuff
mm,
like that. When I did play it, I was really grinding the ladder. So back in the day, the way that it worked is like you would try and accrue these like WCS points, and the way that you would get those is you would play in approved tournaments that earned you WCS points, or you would play the ladder. And if you placed highly on the ladder, you would get WCS points. So back in the day, I don't know. I think I believed that I could get good enough to be like one of the best players. And I think I did kind of like I mean, the ladder is very different to tournament play, and I don't think I really achieved anything noteworthy in tournament play. But at least on ladder, I was able to hit like number one in NA on the ladder, and I was able to pretty consistently be in like the top 100 and stuff like that. When I was like actually grinding, like playing just non-stop grinding the ladder, and yeah, I was good enough to like compete on the ladder in tournament play. I in like some of these like ESL cups and stuff like that, I was able to get into like round of 8 or like round of 4, so like semifinals or something like that. But these weren't like hyper competitive tournaments that were super prestigious. These are what I would classify as more like qualifiers, and you earn these WCS points that maybe one day will, if you're in the top of the standings, will get you to like a bigger event. And I obviously never did anything like that.
mm. So why did you quit? Because like I've said, you obviously still play in some way, shape, or form. So you still like the concept of the game or like the game. I know the answer to
Mm,
this, and that's why I brought it up because I think this is a good transition. But was it just
mm.
purely because you had too much going on and Counter Strike was kind of coming to the forefront of your attentions?
So I actually played them at the same time, and I also played other games as well. So I did play StarCraft like a fair bit as well, and it was pretty. It was even like a lower level of the than Hearthstone. I got really addicted to like ladder systems.
Mm,
So in StarCraft, it's actually one of my big regrets. Not that it literally means anything. Like anyone who's a decent StarCraft player is like that. It literally doesn't matter. But like there was a lot of StarCraft seasons where I played like Protoss and Zerg and stuff like that. I was even switching races and shit. And this is all going to add context to like what the answer to your question is. But like I was like playing the ladder on like two different accounts. And there were points where like, if anyone who knows how StarCraft works, you have like these divisions. In like Wings of Liberty, I was like in like Diamond or whatever, which was like one of the higher divisions. And then like I think I played into like the start of Heart of the Swarm as well. And I was like at the end of Wings and like start of Heart of the Swarm, I was like getting to like first in my master division with like both races. So I was like at the top of the division in terms of points, and I like never pushed it into like North American Grandmaster. And like I was like, fuck, what if I had just like stuck to one race and I could at least say that I got to GM in StarCraft? Because that's like just another thing. Is like, you got to Legend in Hearthstone, you got to GM. It doesn't mean anything, but it does prove that, like, same as like getting to Radiant in Valorant, it does prove that you can play the game to a certain level of skill, and that you are like competent at it. But yeah, to answer your question, and also to tie it into what you were saying about like joining Exile 5 and then leaving Exile 5 and playing one game for an org for a couple of months and then not playing it, is the fact that I think it was a multifaceted issue of I could never stick to one thing. And it was the same in my personal life as well. I could never stick to one thing. I could never commit to one thing and actually fulfill like an end goal. And I think what happened to me, unfortunately, is that I ended up getting very good at a lot of things. And this is even like the same thing in like, personal life when you talk about hobbies and like stuff like, like music or like school or whatever. I would always do things to like a decent level, but never like achieve a great level of mastery at it, or I would show some potential at something. And what it led to is it ended up me being someone who's like a jack of all trades, but master of none kind of thing. It's like, yeah, this guy can do a bunch of different things decently, but not like he's not the best at anything. And what ended up happening with the Hearthstone thing is I was playing Hearthstone and I started scrimming and playing Counter-Strike like pretty heavily at the same time. And basically that meant that I was just like mediocre at both kind of thing. And when you talk about that leaving the org post for Hearthstone, what actually happened there is I was trying to get back into Counter-Strike again. And I was even like trying to get on I was even trying to get onto like XL5's Counter-Strike team straight from like being their Hearthstone player or all that kind of stuff, or trying to get into an org. And I think it wasn't even that long after that where I was like, I like joined like a Vanguard or something like that. I don't know, for Counter-Strike, or joined a different org for Counter-Strike. But again, it was the same thing again. It was literally, I'm a mediocre player, and I'm decent, or I've showed some potential, but I've never quite hit like a good level at anything.
Okay, so that obviously ties into the next discussion topic, which is your Counter-Strike playing career, which, I mean, does it go for a long time? I suppose you sort of, it seems like you started competing in CS around 2013
I
or something.
started, yeah, I started basically when CSGO came out kind of thing. I didn't get in the beta or anything like that, but I started pretty early on switching over from COD to CSGO, because for anyone that's familiar with the COD scene on PC, basically it started dying I mean, some people would say earlier, but actual dying probably like 2011, 2012 kind of thing. And that quite neatly coincides with Counter-Strike Go coming out.
All right, well, just to give some context as to how long ago it was that you started playing, we found a broadcast the other day of a stream that you were playing in. So someone was casting your game. And one thing that they said was, if anyone is having trouble running the stream, it's, you need to drop the quality because it's running at 720p 50 frames. So it's pretty high quality. So that just goes to show how long ago that was. Back in 2013 or whatever. And I think that was one of the games that you were telling me about where you were competing in CGA. So at the time, for those that don't know, like CG
Amateur.
Cybergamer had a lot of ladders, right? And there was amateur, open, or open, amateur, invite, premier.
It was
or whatever.
actually back then it was like amateur, main, and professional. But
Right.
back in that time, it was actually just amateur and professional. I think they only had two. And yeah, I think you might have even like watched the stream or heard it when it was when they were saying like, oh, I think whoever wins this goes to like the CGP or like the professional division or whatever.
Yeah. Anyway, I mean, the TLDR is basically they had a bunch of different ladders that were certain levels of competition, and this was kind of like the obviously the amateur one, the one you play in when you first start. And funnily enough, you're in the grand finals of this particular season of CGA with Team Gravitex. So I haven't heard of them since then, but apparently they were a pretty good org according to Pilski. So there you go. And another interesting note is someone that you were playing against, people might know, Tux, was playing on the other team, and Tux lost 16-0 to Pilski on train in that grand final. So credit there, Pilski. You could have gone somewhere, it seems like, right? When we're talking about you as a player, and I looked at some of your history and how the casters were talking about you at the time, right? You're just this Zoomer kid that's come into CS, and you seem pretty good. You're hitting shots. You told me you were an AWPer back then, so very different to what you ultimately ended up being toward the later stages of your playing career. But
Mm.
what were your thoughts at the time? Did you think you legitimately could maybe go pro? Like, was this, yeah, I am all in on CS after you'd sort of left Hearthstone and kind of
Well, the
tunnel
period
visioned
you're
on
talking
CS?
about is actually before I played Hearthstone.
Hmm.
So, like I said, it's all like quite incestuous and all happening at the same time. Like there were periods where I'd be like scrimming, and then after scrims, we'd end scrims at like 11 p.m. or midnight, and then I'd like on Hearthstone laddering like all night
Hmm.
and like grinding my rank or something, or playing like StarCraft after scrims. Like I was like just hardcore no life gamer. Um, I would say back then I thought I was the fucking best. Like I thought I was literally like the greatest like god gamer, and that like all of the players in the professional divisions and all these like 1.6 and source players were like total garbage, and that I was gonna like own them and shit. And in hindsight, I thought I was way better than I was, and I mean, like watching like games of myself playing back then, I just had no fucking idea how to play the game at all. It was literally all aim, no brain, like ego peaking everybody, just like wide swinging. And look, at the end of the day, that play style does work if you've got the confidence. But I think the reason why our team had success is like all of us switched over from Call of Duty and we had never played a version of Counter-Strike before. We all came from Call of Duty Pro Mod and like we had like the same 5 players. So we just had, and we were all like, this is like all pre HSC gamers. Like we're all like 15 or 16, like 14, 15, 16, all playing together. And like we had like just insane chemistry. We were always playing. We were grinding like harder than other people just because we enjoyed the game and we loved playing the game. And I think that chemistry really helped us improve at Counter Strike really fast and get good. Not necessarily in like a conventional way, but like we were a very good team with like good chemistry, and we had very quick results, even though we were kind of playing the game incorrectly from like a purist perspective.
Was there ever any cheating allegations? Because I know that was a big thing back in the
Yeah,
day.
yeah,
Everyone got
yeah.
cheating allegations.
Yeah, I mean, there was, and I've heard that there was like threads and stuff like that on anti-cheat. Like one of the guys that I ended up being in a team with in my like second season of playing was telling me there was like a like 9 or 10 page thread about me, or like there people were like looking at my demos or something. I don't know how much truth there is to that, but I, at least from what I heard, the thing is that when you come from Call of Duty and you get used to a certain play style, you don't know what Counter Strike fundamentals are. You don't know what crosshair placement is. You don't know what like counter strafing is. You don't know what pop flashing and playing off your teammates and all that kind of stuff. All the stuff that like the pros do. I was not doing that. I was literally running around the map, like looking at, and I played really low sense. And this is a thing, like one of the first like local lands in Melbourne that I ended up winning. People literally like stood behind me and watched me play because I played on such a low sense, like my full arm on the desk, and people were like, "What the fuck is he doing?" Um, but I literally was like, people thought that I was walling and shit because I didn't have my crosshair placed like where the player would be playing. I was like looking at a
Hmm.
wall when in reality my sense was so low and I had no fucking idea what I was doing. So I was literally just staring into a wall and then I would just flick and like headshot people. Like that was like my play style, and it made absolutely no sense. But like when you're fucking like 15, 16 years old or something, you can get away with playing like an absolute idiot and
Hmm.
still like frag out kind of thing. So yeah, I think like when in amateur and then like my first season of like Division 2 or whatever, I was like fragging pretty hard. I think in the first, I didn't make it all the way through my first season of Division 2. And this is like again back to that theme of like never committing to anything and never seeing things through. But I think like for the first like 3 or 4 games of Division 2, because it's like a round robin kind of thing, I was like either like top 3 in the stats or something like that. Like I was farming that division as well, but then I didn't even commit to playing in the team. And then the team that I ended up leaving like ended up winning the league. And that's like a theme as well of me just like being a fucking idiot and like leaving teams that are actually good and stuff like that.
Hmm. So obviously, when we talk about your playing career, it didn't really ultimately amount to a whole lot, right? There was a couple of
No.
lands in there, a couple of nats in there, but I don't think you ever really like won any of them or placed
I
super
mean,
highly in any of them.
I just won local lands. I won Sydney lands. I won a Melbourne land. Um, and some of those had good players at them, but like nothing like a nationals. Like I think my first nationals that I played might have been like a Zubu Masters, which was like that Fnatic Masters, that Fnatic event where like Khan and Devilwalk came to Australia for some reason.
I don't know why that
Which
happened. But
I don't know why that happened, but I played in that, and I think I might have been like one of the bottom stats players at that event, just getting fisted by like snipers immunity and shit like that, just getting absolutely dumpstered after absolutely destroying the online qualifier and then just going on LAN and getting absolutely fisted.
Well, that is perhaps the natural progression of a CS player. But yeah, I guess to sum it up, Ryan, at one point it seemed like maybe you had potential, maybe you thought something could come from it, but it sort of seems like the deeper you got into your playing career, the more other opportunities started to kind of open up. And there's like this little bit of an overlap, right, between your playing career and your casting career, which is kind of where I'm leading this into, because I want to ask, at what point do you decide to kind of stop juggling playing and really commit into casting? And obviously from there we can start talking about how you got into casting and stuff like that. But since we're on the topic of playing, you know, and there is that overlap, what's kind of going through your head when you're still playing and also you're doing a bit of casting on the side as well?
I mean, even now, there's some like small part in the back of my brain that like wants to play, and I think even when Valorant came out, that was a thing, which maybe we'll get into later. But I think when I started casting, I didn't think of it as like I'm gonna be a caster. In fact, I never wanted to be a caster. I was like, I could do analyst desk, and that's what I did in my first ever thing. But I never intended on being a caster in the first place. I think it's a multifaceted thing. First of all, I was interested in it. I think the reason why I wanted to be a caster is I remember watching the streams, and I was like someone. By that point, I'd stopped being like this like dumb zoomer running around with an AWP and quick scoping people and like running at people and one being them. And I had played with a couple of people who had like got even like international experience in like 1.6, or played like a lot of Source and stuff like that. And they really reined me in a lot and taught me like how you're actually supposed to play the game. And I had kind of stopped being like just a all aim, no brain kind of player and actually like picked up being an IGL. And from like learning about like the tactical side of the game, I felt like I could do a better job on the broadcast than people that were actually broadcasting like the games that I was doing. So that's why I started, well, casting, but I never wanted to be a caster. I just literally wanted to do the desk. And I thought that's something I would be good at. Overlapping with playing is like, I mean, like I said before, I don't think I ever really wanted to stop playing, but I think it was a multifaceted thing of like, you know, you start to get older, you know, once you get to like, you know, 16, 17, 18, 19 years of age, the pressure is more and more to actually do something with your life and actually achieve something with your life and not stop being like mediocre at everything and actually go get a degree or get a piece of paper and that kind of stuff. And also I was having like all kinds of like mental health issues and all kinds of shit. So really, I think it came down to a point where like I needed to get my life together. So I was trying to like explore avenues of doing different things. But in hindsight, it was more of the same of just like, I can play and I can cast and I can do this other thing and I can do this other thing and I can do all of it and it's fine. But really, like without a like strong focus on one thing, you're just gonna. I was still mediocre at everything.
All right, so let's talk about actually getting into casting, getting your first job, because this is a pretty funny story, I think. I actually looked back in our Twitter history. I scrolled all the way back up in our Twitter DMs to find the message.
What did I say? What
me.
was the message?
It's actually not that bad. It's actually not that bad. But this is literally like peak Ivory Tower, really. Because at the time, there was really nothing. There was no one. So you were like a godsend to me. This is the message I get. It's, hi, Elfish Guy. I've been interested in doing some casting or analysis for a while now, and I'm someone who watches a lot of CS as well as competing as an in-game leader within most of my teams. What would doing work in analysis and commentating require in terms of prerequisites? Thanks for reading. And at that point, I'm just like, oh, great. He plays CS. He's an in-game leader. Pretty much you're hired. I said, yeah, mostly just top-level experience. I assume you're the same Pilly that played for Avant a while ago. So that'll be good enough. Are you Sydney-based? Yes to both, says Pilski. And boom, there you have a job offer. What are your availabilities like for these evening shows,
and
7 p.m. to 8 p.m.?
And I've been working ever since.
We've been working ever since. So that is how easy it was back then. And Bob's
this
your
is
uncle.
what I keep saying. It's like, when we talk about, I mean, yeah, obviously as a standalone video, you got to give the context, but for all the other times that we've talked and all the other podcasts and everything, you know, so many casters have to grind doing like ESL Open or like online broadcasts and stuff like that. Like my entire career, I've done like one bedroom broadcast on my own, like one. And then other times I might have done like one or two with you. And then everything else I've ever done is studio. And then, and by at home broadcast, I mean like I fired up my own Twitch stream and turned on OBS and like cast a qualifier. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I have done online broadcasts with like a producer and stuff like that, like plenty of those. But for the most part, it's still quite studio heavy, which is like, I guess, a unique experience for me. And I'm just lucky to be, I was just lucky to be in the right place at the right time at that particular point.
Yeah, I really think that is very much the nature of you getting into casting, was right place, right time, because there wasn't too much competition at the time and you were more or less the ideal fit for the role that we needed to fill, right? There was a lot of people that could kind of do play-by-play casting, but there wasn't a lot of people that were actual CS minds. And obviously with your in-game leadership experience and stuff like that, that was a very big positive. And obviously, as you as a person and you as a personality and such were things that needed to be worked on. But the way that it was looked at was, it doesn't really matter what he sounds like or what he looks like, because we can train him to sound and look good faster than we can train someone, or presumably faster than someone can sort of learn what they
learn
need
the
to
game. I mean, you
learn the game.
can't learn those things without experiencing like the things that you experience as a Counter-Strike player. And I think, to be honest, that particular situation was one of the times where being a little bit mediocre at everything, or being like okay at everything, was actually a plus. Because like, my memory of like that first like qualifier is like I was horrible and I like bombed and I had terrible posture and I was like, yeah, I think these guys are really good. Like this tournament's gonna be like great. But like looking back at it, like we watched the broadcast the other day and it actually wasn't that bad. And I think that I had the confidence in myself that I could like do a good job at that. And I had like at least done like some stuff in terms of like, like, I don't know, playing music like in front of other people, or like, I wouldn't say public speaking, but just being like confident enough to be able to talk like in a public space. And even though I was literally just like antisocial gamer nerd, I don't know why I had like that trait, but from somewhere I had that trait, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe being an IGL and talking to the people in your team as well, and that kind of stuff makes a difference. I don't know.
I did have a look back and I found what you got paid for that. It was $22 an hour. So, you know what?
I didn't even know that.
I think at the time, I don't know how old you would have been, maybe like 20, 21. I suppose that is a little bit below what you'd get like working in like a Macca's or a Woolies or something like that, but not by a massive margin. You might get $24, $25 at the time working a job in retail or something. So it was actually not a bad shout. Plus you were doing something that was quote unquote cool, I suppose. Obviously on reflection, we've looked at it back and it didn't seem that bad. Like I had the same thought as you when I've always had pictured in my mind Pilski's first broadcast. I was always like, this was so bad.
Cringe.
But we watched it back the other day and I thought, like if that person rocks up in a studio today, I probably would rehire them. Do you know what I mean? Like I'd say, oh, I can see the potential at the very least. Like there was obviously
that's what I was saying.
It's the potential that was there.
I can definitely see that, like and I have terrible like self-awareness and like self-image, like in a lot of different ways. But and watching my own broadcasts, doing VOD review and stuff like that, I'm very, very frequently not happy with them and don't like the sound of my own voice and all that kind of stuff. But watching that first broadcast, I actually had that feeling where I was like, wow, I actually didn't do too badly. And it gave me like a little bit of validation as well, because I feel like I'm super privileged in life and I've walked into everything and I haven't had to work for anything or I haven't had any talent or anything like that. But I think it kind of reaffirmed to me that like, oh, I actually did good enough in that one position. I didn't have to work hard for it. It was just like I just happened to be in the right place at the right time and do a good job on the right day. But like I did good enough to get my spot, I guess.
Yeah. All right. Let's dive into that a little bit more deep, because you've sort of briefly touched on it a couple of times, how like not quote unquote easy your route has been, but the opportunities that were given to you in a quick, short amount of time that probably other people have to grind for. So I just wanted to like reiterate that and go a little bit more in depth on it. So the first show you do is an IEM Sydney qualifier in a studio. So you completely skip the whole bedroom casting phase.
It was literally a case of like Twitter DM into like, okay, this weekend come to the studio.
Yep.
That was like my road to casting.
So that's the turnaround time. And you also skip all the free work. You go straight into getting paid. I think maybe like that first show you did, it was probably like, oh, do this one for free. And then
I think I did do a freebie at some point. Yeah, I remember that.
For the next one, which then takes me to Zen League finals, which I assume is probably where that $22 figure comes from.
Yeah.
Because you've got that quote unquote experience from in the studio. So we go from studio first broadcast, basically stone cold into studio broadcast, into now doing a LAN final, which was in a quote unquote arena. Like obviously this is a very small arena, but for those that were able to at one point go to the ESL studio in Sydney at the time, you know, you could have like 50 to 100 people in there potentially.
Yeah.
I don't think there was that many people for the Zen League finals, but it was definitely a step up from
like
doing
20, 30 people sitting on plastic chairs.
Yeah, it was definitely a step up from doing your regular show. Plus, we had international teams come down for that. That was where the
Rekka
and MVP guys.
Yeah.
I think there was even a time when like Boot was there, the Mongols. Like there was a few teams actually that came down for these Zen League finals. And from that point, to further compound the accelerated nature of your career, the very next broadcast that you then went on to work was ESL Pro Leagues. So
yeah,
it's a different time.
That's my third. My third broadcast is ESL Pro League.
Yeah,
like, what the fuck is that?
It was an ESL Pro League B stream by right. So there is that, but still, it's ESL Pro League. And look, ESL Pro League wasn't back then what it is today. This was definitely this would have been like season 5 or 4 or something like 5, 4, 6, something like
5
that.
Sounds right.
It wasn't the major product that it is today. Like it was quite a prestigious product.
I felt like it was quite prestigious, and I feel like in some ways it was better back then than it is now.
Anyway,
you know,
what I wanted to sort of bring up as well, and you can comment on whatever you want with the accelerated nature of this whole thing, but you know, you also start casting with Karath at that point, and that was a point where you guys had you know, you guys started forming this like little duo, right? It sort of seemed like, and it was like, and it wasn't by choice necessarily. I don't think it just so happened that you guys had like been put on all these broadcasts together. But what did you think about that at the time? What did you think about casting Pro League at the time? And you know, did you feel ready? Did you feel nervous? All those questions.
I've never felt nervous casting in my life, even in the arenas, or like even IEM Sydney or DreamHack or anything. Which is weird because like I've even done like uni presentations in front of like a class of people I just could not give a fuck about and will never see again in my life. And I felt nervous. Or sometimes if I've done like I did like a talent show or something like that in front of like people from school or something like that, I felt nervous as fuck. But I feel like I'm confident because I'm confident in what I'm talking about. Does that make sense? Like if I'm a little bit confident, like I have some like shred of self-doubt in my head that like I don't really know what I'm talking about when it comes to like, you know, like I did a business degree. Like I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to like fucking like this international supply chain or like some shit like that. Or like,
but I do know
I don't know what I'm talking about in terms of like music. You know, I'm not actually that good at music, but like I've never felt that way with casting. So like I didn't feel nervous about it. It felt right, which is crazy to say because it's like insane level of privilege and just like walking into a job you'd never even earned, but it felt like the natural progression for me, which is like so fucking delusional in hindsight. But working with Karath, I think we had good chemistry. We'd already known each other before we really casted. I remember like, you know, we used to have like fuck sleeping patterns and we used to like be like having like D&M conversations at like the early hours of the morning and shit like that. It just felt random shit. So like we knew each other like a little bit. And he had played Counter-Strike and shit like that. But I think we were actually a pretty good duo. And I think the thing is that already that was a really, really good person to start with because back then there was much more of a culture of improving than there is now. It felt like there was people who had more experience than others and there was mentorship going on and there was like a strive to be good at your job. And I think Kev was like one of the people that really took pride in that. He really was the kind of person that every broadcast he was pushing himself to be like, what could I do better? He wanted to like VOD review after every cast. Like we would finish a map, we would be in the break, and he would like take his headset off and be like, okay, we could have done something different here, or like give me a pointer, be like, give me some more space there, which was only like my third broadcast. But coming from the mentality of being a Counter-Strike player and like doing that same thing in terms of like scrimming, or like doing that same thing in terms of like having that strive to be continuously improving, I think we were kind of adopting that same mentality. And what I will say about Kev as well is like he'll never admit this, because he for some reason thinks he's never been a good caster, or like he never amounted to anything. But I actually think he was probably equally best as a caster back then, in my opinion. I think he was, and that might just be like nostalgia, or like me like overrating him because he was my duo. But I actually really thought he was a really good caster, and I really liked the tone of his voice and when he got really hyped up, and it got me, especially because me back then and even now, like I'm very monotonous and I was way worse back then. I had no like, what's the word for it, where you're like changing the tone of your voice, and
Tempo,
stuff like that. Yeah.
flow,
Yeah,
etc.
there's a specific word for it though, where it's like, you got your ups and downs. I had none
Pitch.
of that. It was all one. No, there's a better word for it. It was all
Whatever.
one note though. It was all a one note cast from
Monotony.
me.
Yeah.
But like he would get me hyped up sometimes, and like get me in the mood to like actually get into the game.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, I think Kev, I guess, I don't know if he's going to watch this. Probably he will, because he's a big Pilski fan. So shout out to you, Kev. But to me, Kev, I think, was always a very high peak caster, but a
Yeah.
pretty low trough caster. So, like, when things were not good, or when he was out of his comfort zone or something like that, the
He's
trough
very
could
hard
be
on himself.
very noticeable. And I think he was technically, and while casting the game, very good. The whole product was where the improvement needed to be made for him, and it
Yeah.
was the same for you, right? You were very good at technically casting the game, but you needed to be taught how to look good
Yep.
on camera and how to sound
Yep.
good. Kev sounded good, but he didn't fucking do his hair before the broadcast.
Yeah,
He rocked up wearing
yeah.
a fucking hoodie. It's just like, come
Yeah.
on, man. Like, are you even trying sometimes? Like, he was good. If you take
Bro,
away the
Kev was literally the equivalent
external
of like
factors.
the guy that shows up to like the hip hop cipher and he just looks like a fucking loser, and then he
Yeah.
gets in there and he's like spitting bars.
Yeah.
But like, oh man,
I know
like,
this is not meant to be Karath in retrospect, but I did have
yeah,
that one memory of him when we went to Malaysia and we did ROG Masters, and to me that was peak Kev. He was casting. I think he was casting with. Was he casting with Hugo? He might have been casting with Hugo. I can't remember who he was casting with, but he was casting with someone. It wasn't me. And I just remember watching him cast. I was like, "Fuck! This is like the best Kev has ever cast. Like, this is the most invested he's ever been in the game. Like, I could feel it."
is that where that red picture comes
Yeah,
from?
that's where
he's,
that
like,
red,
screaming?
angry, yelling, screaming picture
I
comes
wish I'd
from.
seen that, bro. I wish I'd been there,
And
bro.
that was peak Kev.
Peak Kev for me, and this is something that you can look up for yourself, but peak Kev for me, it literally gives me like chills when I listen to it, is like Bentet on Banana, where he got like that
Oh
5
yeah.
all one bullet ace when they're like running up Banana, and Kev's like fucking losing his mind, and that legit gives me chills when I listen to that.
Yep. Anyway, I didn't intend to talk about Karath for this long, but if you're a Karath fan, there you go. That was for you. Now, the one other thing that was quite exciting about your career casting ESL Pro League at the time with Karath was the green wall. I've got the green wall behind me. They're ready to dominate you again, Pilski, in yet another broadcast. Tell me the green wall story. What is this? What am I referring to?
Okay, so coming from being a Counter-Strike player, and obviously I was a fucking mediocre player. Like I was a semi-pro player in Australia, which means that we're talking about like tier 500 CS if you go on the HLTV forums at this point. But yeah, Optic, back when they had a CS team, I think they were playing in the American League.
It was America,
but
yeah. It was
they
like
had
that
like
mix
Danish players.
Danish NA. It was like
Yeah.
NAF, Gade, Magisk, or something like
Yeah.
that. With a couple, I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure NAF was in there, and we know Gade was in there as part of the story.
Yeah, so like I remember they were I think Gate had just joined their team, and I don't know what they were doing with their roles, but he was playing Inners on Train, and I played Inners on Train when I was a player, and I'd watched a million demos, and I used to like idolize watching Taz from like Virtus Pro playing Inners on Train, or like Get Right, like all the classic like Inners players on Train. I remember Get Right like dacking people in the feet on that. So I was a big nerd. Like every time I played Inners Train, I was like, this is my position, and I used to just like absolutely frag out from that spot. So I had like a bit of an ego for some reason about like I know how to play Inner's Train, and I was just watching Gade from Optic play Inner's Train, and he was like he had full belts of util. He was just never using any grenades. He was just always taking aim duels like every round from lower ramp, and I think they just like shoved him in a position he'd never played. But on the broadcast, I was just like straight up roasting this guy. Like I had no sense because, like we say, like this was probably like my third broadcast or something, right? Like my third proper like big broadcast. I've probably done like a fair bit from there, but like in terms of like experience, I really didn't have that much experience. So like I didn't know that it's not okay as a caster to literally call like a professional player dog shit at their position. like and
Really?
like criticize them every round when they do something that's just like really fucking dumb. But like he was just I don't know. I think I was having a bad day, bro, but honestly, like those early wake ups, some of those early wake ups really get to you, bro. You're rocking up at the studio at like 3 a.m., 4 a.m. in the morning, Aussie time. You really don't want to be there. You're fucking eating your like Maccas or whatever. And you're like, this fucking sucks, bro. And then I think I took that energy into the broadcast and I was just going in on Gade for no reason. And I remember there was like a Twitter post from like the Optic manager or something who was probably watching their game and like listening to the cast, and he was like, "There's two funny parts to this story," but the Twitter post. I'll get into like what happened behind the scenes first, and then I'll talk about the Twitter post. But so behind the scenes, I think they were messaging like the ESL people and saying like, if these casters don't get taken off ESL Pro League, I think this is what I heard, but they said something like, if these casters don't get taken off ESL Pro League, we're going to pull our team from the league, which is like insanity to me
Yeah.
that someone would say that. And I heard this like second or third hand because this was probably Optic talking to ESL Global talking to ESL Oz, and then I'm getting like Ben Green or something like coming to me and being like, what the fuck did you do on this broadcast?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you're in trouble, mate. And then so that was one thing. We got pulled aside after the broadcast and got absolutely our asses handed it to us. And it was all my fault. Like I was the one talking shit, but Kev got in trouble just as much as I did, and he didn't do anything wrong at all.
That
It
is the
was
problem
literally
with
all
being a
my
caster.
fault.
You have
Yeah,
to,
like
you live together and you die together. It's like, it's never, I hate this caster. It's, I hate these casters. Or,
these casters.
these casters
Yeah.
are dog shit. Or, I love these casters. It's never, I love Pilly. I love Elfish Guy. It's, these
Yeah.
casters are so bad or whatever. You're in it
Yeah.
together.
So the second part of it, and this is the much funnier fucking part to me, is that he actually posted on Twitter about us doing a bad job, I think, and the Optic GM or some shit, and he was like at Pilski, and then or like Pilly or whatever I was called back then, and then he atted he atted Danny Kim on Twitter. Who wasn't even casting, but literally it was the most like yellow faced like Asian mistake thing I've ever seen in my life. The most like casual racism I've ever seen in
You'd
my
have to
life
tell
because
the context that
oh,
Karath
no,
is
no, this was
Chinese
where that
and
comes from.
Danny is Korean. For
Yeah,
anyone that
Danny is
doesn't know
Korean
those two people.
and Karath is Chinese. Like
Yeah.
they're not even the same kind of Asian. But he just tagged Danny Kim on Twitter and said, and Danny's like not even there, bro. He's probably asleep at this point. He's like, what the fuck?
He
Why is
wakes
someone
up
saying
like,
I'm
why the fuck
casting
am I the worst caster today?
and literally it was just like that made it even funnier that this guy's getting so butthurt that he's threatening to pull his team for the league, that and he's so angry that he can't even find the right race of Asian guy to tag on Twitter.
Oh. Okay. Yeah.
Oh fuck
Look,
me,
I
bro.
remember watching. I remember that whole thing because, like, obviously I was internal at ESL at the time, and like, I remember watching the VOD back and thinking like, it's not that bad. Like the email that I got or that I saw was like, yeah, the casting quality really isn't like what it needs to be for this kind of broadcast. And I was like, I looked back and I watched the VOD and I was like, You know, like it wasn't the best cast of all time, but was it really that bad? Like I didn't think so. But anyway, maybe I'm a little bit
And
biased.
for anyone who doesn't know, back in the day, like ESL Pro League, I mean, it's similar now with all the fucking B and C, D,
Hmm.
Z streams, bro. Like we were doing the B stream, and it was like day 22 of ESL Pro League, and here's our third match for today, and it's like Optic playing like the shittest team in the North American League, and it's like, bro, like please, Ghost Gaming, just like get
Just
4
lose
rounds
or
only.
something.
Like
Yeah.
I just want to go
Yeah.
home, bro.
Yeah, yeah, it was a bit like that. I mean, it felt like a lot of those games just didn't matter because like the season went for fucking ever, and it was like a round
The
robin or
format
something.
was
I think it
crazy.
was like, I think there was a season, maybe it was this season where they played like two
Dude, there were
BO1s or
I
something
feel
against each
like I
other.
remember looking at the standings and it was like an 18 team round robin, and you're like going, we're literally at the end of every broadcast, like, oh, Renegades slipped into 9th position today. Like they
Yeah.
went 7-3. And it's like, bro, like we're literally playing a round robin of like 18 teams
Mm.
in the same, they all play each other. And it's like, holy fuck, bro. Like this
Yeah.
just goes forever.
Yep. All right. Anyway, we should move on from that because we're going overtime, which you know we tend to do on this show anyway. So can't really say I'll complain about it. It's more content to watch. 2018. Let's move on to 2018 because 2017 is like your year where you kind of get into it. You just started. You kind of getting rolling. 2018 is the year where like this is actually the point where you sort of stop playing and do more
Yeah.
casting and stuff. So I don't think that there's actually really anything necessarily massive to talk about when it does come to 2018. But what I will say is there's a lot of reps. You were doing a lot of broadcasts now.
Yeah.
We had ESL Pro League Season 7 and 8. We had ANZ Champs Season 6 and 7. You had IEM Sydney, which we'll talk about a little bit. And we also had some Asia and CIS minor qualifiers. So there's a lot going on. There's probably, you know, 40, 50, 60 days worth of Counter-Strike casting that year. So I just wanted to know if what is that like for someone at your point in your career? How does that sort of affect your skill, your growth? What was the effort level that you were putting in at the time as well? Because I remember having these conversations with you where you were like, well, I don't really think I'm going anywhere with this. Like, I'm just doing it. And then there was a bit of a tipping point, but that sort of came a little bit later on, I think, where you said, oh, you know what? I actually feel like I do want to try and make this a thing.
I can't really remember like what my mentality was back then. I think there was definitely a culture back then of like improvement, like that there isn't now. I don't think, where it's like we would sit down, like as a group. I'm talking about like a group culture and a culture at ESL, like being an ESL caster in Australia, that I don't think really exists now in the same way. And you know, I felt like we used to like sit down, and sometimes we'd even sit down and like watch our VODs together,
Mm-hmm.
or like we would be talking about how to like improve, and we would have like maybe a caster rotation, and 2 of us would be on and the other 2 would be like in the green room and listen to the cast, and then we talk about like, oh, what do you guys think of that cast and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like I was trying to improve, but I feel like I could have done better than I did. I think especially, and I think this is goes back to like a trend of like things in my personal life as well, of like I felt like I was bad at facing the issues of things that needed to be worked on the most. I would hyper focus, and this is why like nowadays I'm much more well rounded than I used to be, and this is what you're referring to. But I feel like back then I would be like casting, and I would be like, was my analysis good enough that game? But I wasn't ever like, how's my posture?
Mm.
How's my energy? How is my, my tone and all that kind of stuff?
I
And
think you were focusing on your strengths and trying to
I
improve
was
on your
trying to
strengths
make
rather
my
than
strengths
buff
like
your
rock
weaknesses.
solid, and
Yeah.
then I was just ignoring my weaknesses,
Mm.
kind of thing, or not ignoring them, but like never working on them enough. And I think that actually took me to the next level as a caster. It was like improving those things, but I don't think I actually improved those things for such a long time. And I think that's probably a big regret. And it's not like I didn't have that fucking feedback a million times. Like you gave me that feedback a million times, and I just never listened to it properly.
Yeah, I can remember, but this was a little bit later on down the piece. This was actually when you and I started casting together as a duo. We would do like this thing before the broadcast where we'd be like, we're going to be real hype. Like, do you remember? It was like,
Yeah,
Pilski, you're going to hype up today. Like, today's going to be
yeah,
Pilski hype day or some shit like
yeah.
that, like 2 minutes
Like
before the
fucking,
countdown ends. Like,
we
let's
would
go.
be like this. Okay, so yeah, before the broadcast, we'd be like this.
Yeah, like
and then the
on our
timer would
phones.
get to like 1 minute, and we'd be like depressed, we'd be like tired, and then all of a sudden we'd be like, all right, 1 minute to go. All right, let's go, let's get hype, and just like full posture and everything.
Yeah.
And that lasted for like the first map, like the first segment, the first map, and then map two, be like, hey guys, welcome to ESL Pro League, fucking.
All right. Well, we're jumping ahead a little bit in the timeline because I do want to talk about you and I as a duo. I think that's something that we've never actually really spoken about. So I think we could get some pretty interesting stuff. But that's in 2019. So
Are you gonna say how it came about?
yeah, of course.
Okay.
Before that, obviously 2018, this is when you're still casting with Karath for the most part. Like obviously, at that time you're sort of jumping around everywhere. Everyone was casting with everyone, but there was kind of set duos. There was myself and Sniper, you
Mac and Rob.
Karath, and I think Mac and Rob. Yeah, but Brainstorm was in there
Tim,
too. Brainstorm
Tim
was casting with
you,
me and
for a bit.
whatever. See, it was all a bit like everyone did everything. But
Yeah.
there was some semi-set duos. Regardless, IEM Sydney rolls around. IEM Sydney 2018. This is actually when I did kind of start casting a little bit with Tim, because very early on in the piece, Ian Sniper was already on IEM for 2017. He did the analysis desk on 2017. So he was kind of like a lock again for 2018 desk, which kind of pissed me off a little bit because Sniper and I were casting together at the time as a duo. And I was like, well, my chances of casting this are determined A, by the fact that I've got a strong duo partner, and B, by the fact that I'm obviously internal with ESL and the broadcast is getting bigger. They need more talent for it. I thought, look, this is my opportunity potentially to get on. And then they're saying, we're going to use Ian on the desk. I was like, does that fuck me? Does that mean they're going to bring another duo in or like something like that? Whatever, beyond that point. And even were that not the case, which is what ended up happening, I would have to cast with someone different who wasn't necessarily my first choice. Like, obviously, if I could have had my first choice at the time, I would have been casting with Sniper. It's no disrespect to Tim. I think Tim actually casted his best event at IEM Sydney. And to this day, I will still say that particular IEM
Might have
Sydney
been one of the best casts any of us have ever done.
was potentially my best cast ever. And I'm sure it was his as well. But anyway, besides the point. So from there, we've already got the two, we've got myself and Brainstorm then locked in. So it doesn't really matter how that all came about because it's not about me. So Sniper's on, myself and Brainstorm are on. And then it's like, what do we do for the other two? Like, there's going to need to be another Australian duo. So who would that be at the time? And obviously yourself and Karath were kind of like the most experienced casters at the time. I don't even know if Mac and Rob had really, I don't think they had really come into the picture at that point. I think it was probably just, like you, Karath, myself, Sniper, and Brainstorm were like the 5 casters at the time. So those were the ones to choose from.
I feel like when it started, I didn't even really see Ian like that much.
He was a bit on and off, right? He was busy with
already
work
on his
and
way
stuff.
out kind of thing.
Yeah. But because of this, anyway, so the TLDR is I started casting with Brainstorm a lot more in 2018 because we knew we were going to do IEM together, which is the same thing that you and I did in 2019. But anyway, what were your sort of expectations around IEM Sydney, right? Because you would have been around for IEM 2017. I assume at that time, no expectation of ever working the event. That was my expectation. But 2018, did you think you were ready? Did you think you could do it? Were you expecting the call up? And were you surprised by it when you got it?
I think I was trying not to think about it. I was trying not to think about whether I would get it or not because I'm the kind of person that likes to keep my expectations low so that I don't get disappointed and don't get crushed when things don't work out for me. I felt like I was going to get it for some reason, but I could definitely see a world in hindsight where that didn't happen and it would make perfect sense. I mean, we only did the group stage. We never did any stadium.
That was another part of the conversation was like, obviously you didn't get to do an arena game. I think Tim and I did one or two.
Did you do just core?
I think we did just the because if I remember correctly, there was 2 international duos, 2 local duos, and there would have been 2 semis and a final in the arena. I'm pretty sure.
Was quarters not in the arena?
I don't think quarters was in the arena for that year. Maybe. It doesn't matter. Regardless, I can only really remember that one game that we did. I don't think we did another one. So, I mean, were you happy to be just like, you know what I mean? Like, when you get that call up, you think, oh, I'm potentially going in the arena, or were you happy with just doing the group stages? Because I think for me, like it was always, I want to do an arena. So
I
to
don't
not
think I
get
was
that, I think would
thinking
have been
about that.
painful.
I don't think I was thinking about arena casts at all. I think I was just very happy to be part of the most prestigious event in Australia, to be honest. And I think some of the group stage games, and this is a trend that will like I feel like follows me throughout my whole career, is like we are talking about ESL Pro League B streams, you're talking about qualifiers, you're talking about doing the group stage games of an IEM. Like we often are given the scraps because obviously you want the best games on the mainstream. But for some reason, like the games that I cast and like so many of them end up being fucking bangers, like just crazy upsets and shit. So I remember 2018 IEM Sydney, like we got an upset where we were already quite heavily following Tai Lu. But for anyone that knows, obviously SKLG, like 20, was it 16 and 17? That was like their era, and they were winning like majors and shit like that. Dude, in the group stage, IEM Sydney 2018, Tyloo upsets like SK, and we got to
It's a
cast
very
the game.
famous
They won
story.
16-14.
Yeah.
And the last round, it's like 15-14 for Tyloo, their CT side Mirage.
1916
And
it ended up actually. It was an
oh,
OT.
was it?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. But I remember. Oh, maybe it was 14-14. I remember a round in regulation where somebody runs up catwalk on Mirage CT side with a four sport UMP in a round where maybe they should have saved. He sits inside the top mid smoke that you just throw default on T side every time for like until it like fades, and then he just pops out of this top mid smoke and runs at SK like when they're all holding like utility hands and just kills three people. And it's like it was just crazy classic Tyloo
That
upset game of
that
absolute bullshit.
that IEM was actually, now that I'm looking at the bracket and like sort of reliving the games in my head, that IEM had so many banger moments. Like you have that Tyloo upset over SK Gaming. Obviously, you're probably going to go on to talk about Greyhound knocking SK out in the lower bracket.
I don't
So
even remember that happened that year,
SK
to be
goes
honest.
from winning 2017
Yeah.
to getting knocked out last in 2018 by an
Yeah.
Asian and Australian team. That's it.
Yeah.
And then obviously, the the Renegades game in the arena, Renegades vs Mouse Sports, there's that. There's just so many things. Oh, fucking Cloud9 versus Order, Rush 1v5 against
Oh,
Order with
fuck.
his first like 5 AWP
Wait,
kills of
I
his
think I
career.
casted that, no?
I think you might have, yeah.
I think I fucking casted that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's another Kev moment where like that rush moment where we thought they were gonna win. Liaz was like 40 bombing or something on Inferno,
Yeah.
and yeah, that was another crazy game. I didn't know that was 18 as well, but yeah, that makes sense actually.
Yep.
But so even though we did groups and we weren't doing arena, I was happy with it. The game's really delivered. I felt like we did some like really good casts, but I don't know. Back then, it was a classic case of like I was working with Kev. We'd been doing ANZ champs. He'd been like, I CBF this shit. Like, I'm just going to cast like mediocre. And then IEM Sydney rolls around and I just see a completely different posture in Kev. Like something's possessed him. And then, Tyloo's just going crazy and Kev's screaming at the top of his lungs and fucking having a great time. So I think I have good memories of casting IEM Sydney, even though the reality of it was, it really wasn't any different from any of the other shows that we were doing. We were in the ESL Oz studios. We were shoved in the studio, like the
side
C
small
studio closet.
Yeah.
Yeah, just get in the closet and cast some Counter Strike, mate. So that it really wasn't any different, but it felt special for some reason.
I do remember at the time, and it goes for 2019 as well, there was always this sort of element of competitiveness maybe within the team, because within the talent team I'm talking about, because it was always like, we know IEM Sydney is coming back. We assume there are X amount of slots for Australian talent, and I want to be one of those, and I want to be the best one. I want to be the one that gets to do the arena show or whatever that may be. So that was a real driving and motivating factor at the time, because it didn't really feel like it didn't feel like it was taken for granted, but it did feel like in the back of your mind, you knew that the work that you put in would reward you.
Yeah, Chance was like scrimming for IEM.
Yeah,
that's what it felt like, and like doing all the domestic leagues and stuff like that over here. It was like I am training myself to be able to do IEM.
Hi there. If you made it this far and you're enjoying the content, please make sure you subscribe. Or if you really want to go the extra mile, you can support me on buymeacoffee.com/elfishguy. There's a link in the bio.